Well, this is our 100th episode. How about that? That's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
That was a totally fake reaction, right? That was kind of put on. Well, it's not, because honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a number.
Can't with you. So first of all, we were in the middle of another conversation, then you just threw that in, so I was a little cut off, but I was excited.
I had to get us going.
100 episodes.
That's the 100th episode.
I'm soaking it in.
And I want to say to Roy and to Melix that I didn't say, hey, we're having a 100th episode. I want Lynne, Amy, and Jack. It was, I had y'all on the schedule, and that's where this fell. So I don't want them to feel bad.
Oh, I thought you were going to...
Is this, like, intentional, or are you just really bad at hyping things up? Yeah. Because at first you're like, 100 episodes, who cares? And then you're like, these hosts, random.
Yeah.
We're
doing? Very confused right now.
Just because I don't believe or agree doesn't mean I can't learn from you.
Why did you have to bring that up?
Okay, that one I'm super embarrassed about.
Do you like me?
Do I like you?
Yeah.
As an individual or as a podcast?
Just as a person.
No, I like you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I don't have any interest in appearing to be stronger than I am.
I ain't bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He gonna lead. You feel me?
How do we love people who see the world differently than we do?
What would it look like if we truly loved all of our neighbors? Could listening to their stories be the first step? This is Seacoast Church, and there's way more to talk about.
Was growing up. He was my favorite.
What do you mean when you say growing up? Like, are you saying when you were a kid?
Middle school and high school, yeah.
That was your favorite pastor?
Because he was the funniest.
As far as teaching?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He made everybody laugh more?
Yeah. My favorite Geoff Surratt joke, which was improvised, or rather it was in response to the audience, was I can't remember what the message was about, but he basically said, and this was when Mike, his son, was, probably like in elementary school, maybe middle school. He was talking about like how his son was terrible at basketball, and like the crowd just went like, "Aw," and Jeff's like, "Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. He's going to play in the NBA one day. He'll be the only slow white guy that can't shoot." Just like completely flaming his son. Even worse than the first joke was just like, that's my guy right there. One day he's going to marry me.
That is awesome. Well, this is our 100th episode. How about that? That's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
That was a totally fake reaction, right?
That was not.
I didn't. No.
I'm talking to Amy right now.
I
could tell it was genuine over here. I heard you out of my left ear. I mean, that was kind of put on. Well, it's not, because honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a number.
Can't with you. So first of all, we were in the middle of another conversation, then you just threw that in, so I was a little cut off, but I was excited.
I had to get us going.
100 episodes.
That's the 100th episode.
I'm soaking it in.
And I want to say to Roy and to Melix that I didn't say, hey, we're having a 100th episode. I want Lynne, Amy, and Jack. It was, I had y'all on the schedule, and that's where this fell. So I don't want them to feel bad.
Oh, I thought you were going to say why you wanted us here.
No. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure that all of the hosts actually listen to the podcast. So they record episodes, but I don't know that they would know.
Yeah.
So
right, Jack's going to have a really hard time in this episode, because this episode we're going to talk about the podcast. He doesn't know anything about it.
He does.
So the way you're doing this,
Jack thought we were just having small group, and Caitlin, the sound engineer, was back there shy.
Is this intentional, or are you just really bad at hyping things up? Yeah. Because at first you're like, 100 episodes, who cares? And then you're like, these hosts, random.
We're very confused right now.
Well, if
you're balloons.
If you're listening, you have the option of YouTube, and there's tons of balloons in here. But listen how.
But we don't care, because it's not a big deal.
Who cares?
It just happened to fall on this day.
We just happened to be free.
Okay,
and
all right.
Let's
get real then. Do y'all really think it's a big deal? Like 100?
Yes.
Okay, well then, cool.
Woo!
This is a great.
I'm kicking underneath this table right now.
Lynne and Jack are discussing with me a little bit. Hey, I do wonder, what is it like on the other side of the table, so to speak, because it's just been our flow the last couple of years. I come with a plan, and outside of maybe one or two things, you guys have no clue what we're going to talk about. Like, do y'all enjoy this? You're not getting paid anything, so you have to enjoy. This is a volunteer work. This is your dream team position. You're on the dream team. You're on the volunteer team podcast.
Listen, when you work at a church, you do a lot of things that you might not choose to do.
Yeah.
But are for the greater good.
Yeah.
What's the greater good in this one?
We don't know yet.
We don't know.
Hey, man, you're supposed to be the nice person on this podcast.
Look at the faith at this table. Not faith in you. Faith in something greater.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be crazy if you were all on this team to like, we got to figure out how to keep Joey from getting Seacoast in big trouble.
This is like the Truman Show. Yeah. It's like everybody knows what's going on except Joey.
Yeah.
Lynn finds out that we're starting a podcast I'm doing. She immediately calls Jack. She's like, you don't know what Seacoast is doing. We've got to do something.
Yeah, no, Joey, not a single episode has aired.
Yeah, just so you know. Her trait. Yeah.
Y'all found a way.
That's why you're like 100 episodes. You're like, nah.
To you, but
so y'all have random people coming up to me on Sunday morning saying, we love the podcast. Like I'm really in the Truman Show.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all fake. We wanted to break that to you today.
Oh, that is funny. That is some really belly laugh right there. Holy cow. Well, I did want to say this. So I was thinking about the timeline of this podcast, and I started off by just randomly having people from staff come on as kind of like intro conversations, what you guys have gotten used to doing. But it just occurred to me, it was like, I actually want there to be some chemistry being built, and the only way to do that is to have consistent people coming to the table. And so I was thinking, what one thing you all have in common, and I actually wrote this down.
Great.
You wrote it.
I believe in you, Joey. Say something nice.
As lighthearted as this episode is, though, this is serious thought. I thought about, so basically what we're talking about, you three, Amy, Jack, Lynn, and then I'm thinking of Roy and Tamilix, because as of right now, that's kind of the rotating in and out crew. And one thing you all have in common is you talk in a way in which you don't have anything to hide. And then I elaborated, you aren't overly concerned about what you are saying in real time. I think you're a good actor because I think you are concerned with what you're saying in real time. I'm pointing at Jack, but that's just my guess. And then you aren't trying to make things come across in a certain way. What do y'all think about that? Self-evaluation, would you say, yeah, that's, whether that's a compliment or not, that matches how I feel at the table?
Yeah. I would say most of the time. There are some times that I'm like calculated. What is about to come out. But yeah, most of the time.
But not calculated in a way of misleading people with what you're thinking. You're just being more careful.
Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of the, calculating thing, it's just like I always want to say what I'm trying to say, which is like difficult to do sometimes. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. But like I'm also, I think it's the, like you said, like the not trying to hide something. It's more like the, how do I want to say this in a way that's going to actually convey what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I want to, I think vindicate is the correct word.
Vindicate.
Yeah. I hammered you on an episode a few weeks ago about what I thought was incorrect use of a word. And hey, I feel like even though we're having a fun time, the record needs to be set straight.
Yeah.
So you said it was unconscious, and I was like, I immediately was like, what? You were kind of like asleep?
You mean subconscious?
I think I caught Jack in misusing a word, incorrect definition or something like that. So go ahead and set the record straight.
Well, no, the record is straight. I was right. And,
no, but what was right, though? I didn't tell them what your pushback was. You said it can also mean what?
Well, it's like that, if you're unconscious, it could, you're saying something that is, again, like kind of beneath the surface. But the way in which I shared that information with you, Roy and Lynn, was I sent a text that night and I said, hey, guys, I think I said, just been thinking a lot about today's episode and just wanted to share something, if that's okay. And then
there was a pause, I was like, Jack's about to open up. We're about to be on his friend list.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to wait about 45 seconds to send the next one. And then I just send a screenshot of like the dictionary definition of the word.
Classic.
Oh, I love it. All right. So I also thought this was noteworthy. And Amy, I'm curious because I'm getting to know you as a podcaster a little more. You're a little more new to me. So I'm still trying to figure. I would not think that this you'd be in the same category with you two, Roy and Tamilix. And now it's going to sound like I'm being mean because I'm going to give them a compliment. And I'm like, but not you.
It's okay.
But,
I can take it.
No, but here's
I'm used to it.
No, but I put myself in your category too. See, I feel like we're in the same category.
Why did you say that?
I like Joey.
Wrong direction.
Just the two
I tried to
us.
make it better by saying, but you're in the same.
You're like me.
You can't offend me. It's fine.
I feel like I don't know if people would see it as a skill or not, but a skill I've had to develop as a podcaster is pushing back or expressing disagreement. Now, I will say that sometimes, in my personal opinion, it's not necessarily the best tactic because the point of the conversation isn't about what you disagree with, and you're probably going to interrupt some sort of flow of really understanding someone else's perspective. In other words, there's some conversations, they're not meant to have like this big back and forth. It doesn't mean you can't push back, but it's just not the point of the conversation. You may know, oh shoot, this is going to go an hour so sometimes it's not the right timing. But you guys, if it's pertinent to what we are talking about and someone says something that you disagree with, these two, Roy and Tamilix, would speak up, where my go-to is, well, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, and I'll always kind of opt for, we're just trying to get their perspective, and I'm not someone who is antsy. And I wouldn't say y'all are necessarily antsy, but it's just not a strength of mine. But it has to be done sometimes. I mean, I think for the sake of the conversation. Would you say that's a strength? Am I right to guess that maybe that's not a strength of yours, or would you say no,
right.
it is?
Yeah. Because I think I just know that I don't know everything. So I'm like, well, I never looked at it that way. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't want to come across like that I know what they're talking about and disagree right away.
Yeah.
Like,
but
open mind.
Yeah. There have been times where the four of you have pushed back on something, and I have been like, wow, I'm really glad they said that. Like whether it's probably, I'm thinking you mostly because you and I have done the most interviews. You've done the most interviews with me. And I think there's times where you'd push back or say something. I'm like, gosh, I'm glad she said that. But the four of y'all have made some really awesome moments on this podcast. And we are actually going to watch one. So or listen if you're listening. But let me just set this up a little bit. And I thought this was a really cool moment on the podcast. I came to the table because I thought there was a Christian celebrity that we were going to talk up and kind of honor her a little bit because she tweeted something that I just thought was so awesome. And I was totally like, wasn't that great? And it was the best awkward. It's so much more awkward on video. But then what you'll see is Lynne is kind of like, should we laugh yet? Because we obviously don't agree. But then you're like, oh, he's still talking. So you get serious again. So just listen to this one clip, and then I've got another clip of the same conversation that I want to show y'all. Now watch Lynne.
Your face says it all.
So here's another great part is the looks that Jack gave me as I continued my pushback in this conversation. Y'all check this out. Watch how I trip. I'm looking at Jack. I'll edit some of this out. I just had to move on. He was so disgusted he could not say anything.
That's so funny.
He was silenced.
It looks like the words that came out of your mouth like forced my brain to protect itself, shut down for a minute.
It's priceless.
His brain kicked in to shut it down.
There's no expression there.
You couldn't even make
like
a face.
My entire person was rebooting. So that I could deal with so that I could deal afresh with that question.
Oh my gosh.
That's funny.
Jack, I guess I'm trying to feel a little special here. Like, you don't give that look to just anybody. Like, you're a nice guy. You gave that look to me, and you gave it to me good. It was like a stare down.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that just to anybody. You have a comfort level with me, right? Or would you do that to anybody?
No, I would not do that to anybody.
Good to know.
Yeah. Well, because here's part of the thing. Like, and this is actually something I think I got from my dad a little bit, is we both have very strong opinions, and that look I inherited from my dad's mom's mom, who was famous for the "you are an idiot" look that she would give to everyone freely. But my thing is, like,
a name.
I think a lot of things, and but also, like, I don't want to bother, like, I don't want to upset people. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't like that. And so, no, I don't give that look out. I restrained myself actually yesterday. I was at Publix and I was like at the self-checkout, and I was done. I just put an apple in my bag. And the lady who was just running the self-checkout, she comes and goes, "Whoa," reaches into my bag, pulls out the apple, and she's like, "Look at the size of that thing." And I realized that, like, if I'd gone through a normal lane, the person would have touched all of my stuff anyway. But it was something about, like, reaching in my bag, pulling it out. I'm just like, what I'm thinking is, what are you doing? And also, now I need to just throw that apple away.
What did you say to her?
I said, "Ha ha, yep."
Like that?
Well, she's like, "Look at the size of that thing." And I said, "Ha, yep."
Hey, do y'all get why? Or let me ask this way: Wouldn't y'all think it off-putting if we talked about stuff like in that clip that we just showed? It was about a very famous person. That'd just kind of be lame if we left that in there. Y'all understand why we bleep it? Like, would that make sense to you?
Yeah. And I think even beyond bleeping it, it would probably be better to, like, navigate the conversation without even saying the name.
That's true.
Because when you bleep it, then people are like, they go to search for it because they're trying to figure out who's been arguing on Twitter or but if you're just like, oh, there was a famous person who said this thing without having to say their name.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you even meant not telling you guys while we're podcasting who I'm even talking about, and you guys speaking from that sort of neutrality also. You were saying that too?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, gotcha.
Like, she just gave you that look, just so you know. I get it now. I'm on the lookout.
Lynne hides it a little bit. She hides it a little bit.
Okay. Do better.
Like, as someone who are you? I guess you're in charge of all the communication that goes out from this church. You oversee that part, Jack. So I have to remember that some people are just listening. Lynne, you are in charge of all the communication that leaves this church, technically, right? Communications.
More or less, I would say. Yeah, for the large part.
And so you oversee communications, and part of that is creativity too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you agree? Because this is one of those things. Obviously, Geoff Surratt and other people can make certain calls. I would say mostly Josh and Greg. But as far as your actual role, you make the call on what we throw out there. It's going to come to you at least and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" If it's kind of on the fence.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like, because in the same way, it's like Josh is responsible for everything that happens here, but he can't be in everything. Right. That's why. So
it'd be really lame if we talked about people on this podcast it wasn't disrespectful. Nobody disliked this person we were talking about, but you guys still responded to what she did unfavorably. That would just be kind of lame on a church podcast just to say her name. Would you agree?
Yes, on the podcast, I agree. I think, like, so one of the benefits. So part of the thing is, and one of the reasons is because people like seeing other people's dirty laundry. And it's a gross impulse, but we all have it. And, for various reasons. So, not naming names is good for that reason. One way in which I do think it is sometimes good to name names is because seeing that person as an individual. Because it's like, if they're just some nameless entity, you can be like, what a moron. But, it's like, they're a person with a family and, hobbies and preferences and, things in their past that are hurt. Like everyone is a full person. And so I do think sometimes, at an individual level, it's like if you were a good response to wanting to see someone else's dirty laundry is actually to learn a little bit more about them. So that they're not just someone that you can be like, what a loser, or what an idiot.
Like seeing them as more human?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that's and anonymity just kind of allows you to hate them.
Right. Gotcha. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, cool. Do y'all have any, I give y'all sometimes a little homework assignment, but I'm never offended if you can't do it. You know what I'm saying? I can't just tell you to do your homework. It's not school, right, Amy?
Right.
But if y'all wanted to share some episodes, Jack, you don't listen to the podcast, but any episodes that you guys have enjoyed, just one or two. People ask me what's my favorite all the time, and I don't know my favorite from which one I enjoyed listening to the most, but I would say my favorite,
I know which one,
all things considered, is
the Laura Ingalls, right?
That would be right up there. That would be right up. That's probably my favorite guest, just because of how connected I am to that show. But I'd say my favorite episode is Reverend Anthony.
That's mine.
Yeah, and I think for me, here I am sitting with this guy. So for those of you unfamiliar with the episode, it's episode 7, and it's the husband of one of the victims in the Charleston 9 shooting in 2015 or 16. Yeah. But in real time, this gentleman is sitting at this table, and I'm hearing his story, and I'm figuring out, he's the guy that I heard forgiving Dylan Ruth on TV, watching Dylan Ruth on the TV screen, and I'm hearing this guy say, "We forgive you, the Lord forgives you," and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's this person. And then as he cranks out what was going on behind the scenes and telling us what was going on in his mind, I was like, I think God used this guy to keep Charleston in a state of peace and forgiveness, because it was like, if the very victim's family, so I would consider him a victim, they took, this kid killed his wife. If he responds in forgiveness, then what are we to do? Yeah. What, are we going to go riot when the very person that is affecting the most is forgiving? So that just blew me away.
Yeah.
That blew me away. So that's your...
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite episodes. And just to even hear, because sometimes you hear of horrific things happening and someone forgiving from it, but you never hear the struggle that they went through, or how it really was an act of obedience, or how even in that moment, when they're in the hearing and the Lord is telling him to say something, and internally he's like, I don't want to do this, And so it just, I don't know, it just gives you a better perspective of forgiveness isn't wrapped up in this pretty little bow where you're like, I don't have any of the feelings of grief and anger and hurt. You have all of that and you still forgive. So that was one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say other things that I wrote down, one of the most proud I have been is of Roy getting on here and talking about health and his, weight and all. I was just like, gosh, who does that? Like, you can't find, it would be really hard to find a conversation out there like that of someone who's willing to come on and talk about that struggle, because that struggle is just right in front of everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can have struggles and nobody even knows.
Right. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed Lynne kind of having a conversational experiment and figuring out whether or not she was an introvert and being able to talk to Jack and Natasha. And what's so funny is the number of staff who reached out and they were just like, I felt heard and understood, and thank you, good American. And I could just hear the music in the background.
I was so naive going into that conversation.
Yeah, you're like, maybe I'm an introvert.
Like, I'm an introvert. And then I was like, oh no. I don't understand understand any of what's going on.
One of my favorite things after that was, I think, like later that week, because usually, like, so when Joey kind of sets up, hey, this is the host crew, he usually sets up kind of like a group chat, text message. And like later that week in the group chat with Lynne, Joey, Natasha, and I, Natasha just dropped in and was like, hey, everyone, I just had someone cancel plans. And I was like, amazing. Congratulations. I am so happy for you.
This is a good day for you, huh, Natasha?
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's an amazing feeling.
Oh, man. It really is. It really is. Thank you, Lord, for cancellations. Trivia question for you guys. Who, and there may be more, but I'm pretty sure there's just one of each. Who has had to be edited? And this would be, I'll give you a clue. It's a Seacoaster. Who's had to be edited for inappropriate joking at least once?
Chip.
You got a guess?
I don't see anybody being inappropriate.
It's 100% Chip.
Yes, Chip.
I've recommended it.
Yes, actually, Lynne.
I did not jump on the bandwagon.
Last time I was like, oh no, take that out.
Yeah.
I haven't been on
Lynne, listen and respond right away. That has to be gone, Joey. One of the most awkward moments for me personally was, I believe, getting very tongue-tied, nervous, and also saying stupid white boy stuff with the brilliant, intelligent black women that we had for Black History Month this February. I don't know if I was ill prepared or what, but I did not like that. And then another awkward moment, I don't know if you remember this or not, but so Lynne and I interviewed a former mafia guy. And so the
Robert Borelli.
Yeah. So the tech stuff was, we were still trying to figure it out. And so this is the first interview Lynne and I are doing. So, I mean, it's kind of clinky. We've got the computer screen. We're trying to work out all the microphones and everything. And so I always try to lighten the air by giving like a little joke. And
Joey.
And so first of all, I just think this is the funniest thing ever. This is a New Yorker. He's from Brooklyn, and his name is Robert Borelli. I'm a Southern boy. So one of the first things I say is, hey, he's like, hey, I'm Robert Borelli. And I was just like, cool, man. And I was like, can I call you Robert? He looks at me like I'm crazy. And then he pauses. He's like, oh, yeah, that's what everybody calls me. It's like, that's the dumbest question ever. I just told you my name's Robert, but in New York, they're not thinking sir or mister. I'm thinking, should I call you Mr. Borelli? But I tried to lighten the air with a joke. I basically said, now, sir, like, Lynne and I need to know, are we safe talking to you right now?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm telling you, it did not land. He is just looking at us. His agent or assistant or whatever.
Off the screen.
No, he laughs in the background to, I think, cut the thick air of awkwardness. Like, he laughed in the background. And I tried to find that, and I think I must have edited it out because it just did not land. And I don't know if he didn't hear me or if he just didn't. I don't know.
I thought you were serious.
Maybe he didn't understand my crazy sense of humor.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
I don't think that was it.
What do you think it was, Jack?
I think it was really cringy. I'm cringing now.
Is that a bad joke?
Yeah. It's not funny.
It's not funny. Okay. So it's not inappropriate or disrespectful. It's just not funny.
I think jokes that aren't funny are both inappropriate and disrespectful.
Oh, that is funny. That is
I'm going
funny.
to disagree, and I'm going to say I think it was funny. How is that, Joey?
Oh,
I just disagree. I'm pushing back.
Nice.
I thought it was funny.
And she's completely authentic
and
with
she
that.
Gave you a look.
I thought it was funny.
She gave you a look.
I would have laughed.
All right, so we're wrapping this thing up. I actually have a serious question for you guys when it comes to my talk with Pastor Geoff. So he was my boss for, gosh, I don't know, 5-6 years, and having, he's a great guy. I enjoyed working with him. I mean, there are definitely some intense moments for sure, but I realized maybe 12 years later that I'm still intimidated by him. And so I actually did a dictionary search because I was like, I'm not afraid of him. But then every time I looked up intimidation, it's like frightened and all that. So I was like, well, maybe intimidation is not the right word. But I actually told, because we're close enough, I told him, I feel a little intimidated. And I asked him this, and I want to ask you that. Is that a compliment, or is that something that would be disheartening to hear? Somebody says, Lynne, when I see you around the office when I was new on staff, I'm intimidated by you. Like, do you think to yourself, wow, I hate that? Or, well.
Context. It depends on who the person is. I don't think I take it as a compliment. I don't think I take it as a compliment initially. But then, it depends on the context and the why. Because if somebody says that, they usually have this is why I'm intimidated. The word intimidated does invoke like a fear element. Yeah. And so I don't, like if they were like, oh, I'm nervous around you, or, like there's something where it's like, oh, you seem like, separated, and I don't like, I didn't know you were a normal person and down to earth. Right. Like that's a different thing than intimidated.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to think about because it's not that. It's not like I have something, but it may just go back to the connection I have with him are very inexperienced years of ministry because that, it's when I was kind of getting my feet wet. Honestly, I was a teacher for 5 years, but still kind of getting my feet wet in the professional world. And that was the guy that had to deal with me. What if somebody said I'm intimidated by you? How would you receive that?
So I'd agree with him. Like, I don't take it as a compliment because in part, like, that's not what I want. But, I will say, like, when you ask that question, what I always think of when, like so-and-so, I feel intimidated, it always makes me think of when I was in college, I was having a conversation with some friends of mine, and I was asking them, I was like, I don't know. I actually don't know what I asked, but basically came to like, oh, hey, Jack, like, girls aren't going out with you because like they're intimidated by you. And I was like, well, that sucks. That's a problem. I don't like that at all. Yeah, like, right. This is a problem that I need to fix. And so like that's always like how I kind of feel about that word is It's like, don't like that.
Kept you from dating when you wanted to date.
It literally did.
You started dating 5 years later than what you wanted to because
it literally did. I will say though, like in the Seacoast context, is I've got kind of a similar feeling. There is, a part of me that just always feels like I'm 13 years old when I'm around Greg or Jeff or, Sam Lesky. Because it's like, so 2024 is 30 years since we came to Seacoast. So I came here when I was 11. And so there is a part of me where it's like, I always feel like a little tiny bit like I'm still a kid. And that's not a bad feeling. It's just, just something you push past a little bit. But it's funny. It's like, that's always going to be a part of the relationship that I have with, some of the people at Seacoast is that, it's just like I've got those memories of like working at Chick-fil-A and Pastor Greg comes through the drive-thru and like I lean over because I'm like, I have a joke that I know you'll like. And so all those memories are in there. For me, it's not intimidation, but it is, kind of like hey, there is a part of me that's always going to feel in some part or in some way like I'm 12.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. What do you think if somebody said they were intimidated by you?
Well, I know no one would ever say that.
That's what I was thinking. It's like that's so these are people who
what you're saying is I can't even imagine it. I can't even imagine it.
I can't believe you even just asked me
Y'all
that.
don't even know Pastor Jeff, right? Lynn and Amy.
I have like personal with his wife, yes. I think they were still here when I came on staff. Maybe they weren't, but I was at the Irmo campus when they were still on staff before they.
Okay, gotcha. He tried his hand at imitating your dad, Jack.
Jeff did?
Yeah. On this episode, everybody gets to hear him, and but he even messed up. If you imitate your dad, what's the one word you have to start off with?
Yeah.
Exactly, and I had to call Pastor Jeff out. I was like, you didn't do it right.
My sense is that Jeff, you probably just over-prepared a little bit, I think is what probably happened there. But, it happens.
That's good.
What do you think about Jeff's intelligence? You've known him over the years?
We thought we'd get through one episode without an awkward question for Jack.
No, I'm asking Jack's dad. What do you think about Geoff Surratt's intelligence?
I can't answer that as my dad. I'm going to answer that as me.
Even more awkward.
And the answer to that would be I don't think about Geoff's intelligence at all.
The Seacoast Podcast. It's that 100th episode.
All right, Pastor Geoff Surratt, you're not only, like, sometimes I use the word family loosely, like your Seacoast family. You're like real deal family, the younger brother of the founding pastor. It's weird to think that there's people listening. There's probably more people listening that don't know you. That's weird. That's weird because you haven't been here for so long.
Yeah, we left, Joey, it's great to be with you. We left, we left the beginning of 2011. So there are way more people who attend Seacoast now that I've never met. We were there from, when did we come? 1996, back in the late 1900s. And then we were there through 2010. But yeah. And you mentioned being Greg's younger brother. I hate to be picky, but could you include much younger brother?
Much.
If you could go back and edit that in, much younger brother.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of work just to, make that clarification. But you used to be my boss.
But if you'll check my writer, you'll see that it's on page 3. So,
hey, I don't know I don't know how you'll take this, if it's complimentary or if it's, it wouldn't be an insult, but I just realized, Pastor Geoff, that I'm still, it's just a little bit, but I'm still a little intimidated by you. Does that surprise you?
No, that's important. It's important to stay intimidated. And hey, while we're being honest, this isn't my first time to be interviewed by you on a podcast.
That's true.
And I'm a bit intimidated too. if this goes as well as the last couple times, I'm in deep trouble. So yeah. So we have mutual intimidation. That's good.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just want to dive into, honestly, a lot of memories that I have about you. I'm going to make you uncomfortable and brag on you a bit. But, one thing that I was thinking about is you were my boss in perhaps definitely the greenest of ministry experience that I had. And not that I have arrived now, but hopefully I've acquired some wisdom. How was I decent? Was I pretty good? Or was I the biggest headache ever? Or you don't remember?
Joey, I'm just going to be totally honest.
Maybe not. Totally.
No. You were in the top 5 headaches, at Seacoast. You were in the top 5. I'm going to give you that. At the same time, man, I loved working with you because you say green. You dove in with both feet. You didn't know what you didn't know, so it didn't get in your way. You were up for anything. Hey, let's go meet in this awful school with this nasty cafeteria that hasn't been cleaned since the 30s. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to this really strange theater that shows really interesting movie. Yeah, let's go do that. I loved. I mean this honestly, Joey. Yeah, you were a pain. Of course you were, but you're one of my favorites. Absolutely. Sherry and I are reminiscing. Sherry and I were reminiscing last night. Your wife worked with my wife in the kids ministry, and Sherry was sharing some unbelievably embarrassing stories about you that Priscilla shared with her. We miss
moving on, Pastor Geoff.
Yeah. Just know, Joey, if you want to go some places, I'm locked and loaded this morning.
I will say though that I know Priscilla would vouch for this. Your wife may be the number one most influential person on Priscilla, at least while she was there. She's definitely a hero in Priscilla's life. Hey, let me ask you this, and I was going to ask this a little bit later, but I think it's a good time it's kind of a more serious, theological question. But I look back now, and I can't help but to think. So 2008 is when I took over, or when we started the James Island campus, and looking back as a 46-year-old, I was not ready. And at the same time, back then, I for sure thought that I was ready. So as a leader, when you specifically, for lack of better words, deploy young leaders, do you think the readiness that you see has to do more with the posture of someone's heart, because it's not wisdom and experience. And I think about I think about the disciples, and probably a good parallel there. But seriously, like, what do you go off of? Because it certainly, like I said, is not my experience.
Yeah, you can't teach experience, right?
Right.
And people are, young people have wisdom. There's no doubt about it, but not necessarily wisdom that comes from experience. What do I look for? I look for humility, and that's not just young leaders, older leaders. Just are you humble? Are you teachable? Mm-hmm. Is there just a desire to grow, to learn? Is there this is going to sound funny, Joey. It really is. I don't know how to best say it. I was talking to a friend a while back talking about church planters, which what you did at James Island, very similar to church planting. And he said, a great church planter is humble and hungry, all that, but they're also arrogant and a little bit insane. What do you mean by that? They said, well, they look at something that doesn't exist as though it does exist. And then they think to themselves, I can build that. And you got to have it.
Yeah.
And you had and have that in a good way.
Awesome. Well, let me do some reminiscing here. I bet you some of these, your brain had no reason to save these, so maybe some of these will be stuff like I don't remember that, but I remember at the James Island campus, and this was when we were at the high school, the video feed was failing us. And so kind of the first step when that happens is to reach out to you, let you know that it's what's going on. And so it just happened to be a particular morning when you were able to shoot over there. And I remember you were looking at a message, and I was way more insecure than I am right now. And I think it would be safe to say I wanted your approval. And I basically hinted that, and it wasn't in an angry way, but it was like, Pastor Geoff, you're assuming your role to teach because you think that I can't handle. And I said something along the lines of, hey, I don't know if I asked you, hey, why do you, Again, it wasn't in a pushing against authority or anything, but what I thought was neat is I think I was subtle, and you caught on to my insecurity and you addressed it, and you're like, Joey, I have this message ready. Like, this is a message that I've taught many times. I'm just having your back. But either way, I didn't feel like you were in my space, but I just thought, man, do you not believe in me? I can do this too, Pastor Geoff. But there's some things that someone will say to you, and I'm sure you could relate to this. The few things that you'll always remember when someone said this, and this is a life lesson, and it has impacted the rest of my life, and I attribute this to you. So someone wrote the James Island campus. I don't know if they specified to me or not, but just ripped it to shreds. I mean, from the hospitality, probably to the coffee, to whether or not it was a personal feel. And I remember reading this and I was like, Pastor Geoff, I just don't understand this. Like, this does not sound like they came to the James Island campus on a Sunday morning. And I'll never forget what you said is, basically, you concurred. You said, yeah, I would agree that this person is a little out of line in their train of thought. But you said, one thing I'd recommend is, can you find anything in this letter that could possibly benefit you as a leader? Like, is there anything that they said that you could take in as constructive criticism? And I'll never forget that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear I actually said that. Like, there's not a lot I remember before 2016. Right. But yeah, it's funny you say that, Joey. I was up in the middle of the night last night, and just old man challenges. And I happened, I shouldn't confess this, but I actually glanced at a social media thing last night, and somebody put a comment up about something I had written, and I think the one word that stood out to me is he said, everything you said in this is meaningless.
Oh my gosh.
Well, meaningless. I mean, that seems rough. And so it's funny you say that, Joey, because I gave you, that input, 15 years ago. 15 years later, I'm still having to learn that myself to go, okay, don't get stuck on meaningless. Like, what here is something I can learn from? How can I grow from that?
Yeah.
And, that is so hard. But I think that's a huge part of not just leadership, but it's a huge part of just functioning as a healthy adult, is to accept negative input for what it is, reject most of it, but look at it and go, you know what? They probably have a point here. Let me get past meaningless.
Yeah, right.
Let me get past nothing at James Island campus is any good. Let's get past that. And, you know what? Maybe we could tweak this piece a little bit. They probably have a point there.
Yeah. What's funny is when you flip that around, I would like to question that person and say, was that your best strategy to get Pastor Geoff's attention to listen to the rest of what you had to say? Was that the best you could come up with? Hey, meaningless, but hear me out. You said that you started at Seacoast in 96, correct?
Late 1900s, 1996.
Yep. And so try not to be humble on this one, Pastor Geoff, but you were, I think, the main orchestrator of the multi-site process kickoff here at Seacoast. And I am legit interested, how many churches do you think could be considered OGs of multi-site? Like, it seems like it was Seacoast amongst maybe like two others. Were we really the ones that kicked that off? Like, what's the history there?
Yeah, it's interesting, Joey. The OG of multi-site, well, for me, the OG of multi-site is the New Testament church. Paul started most of them and tended to travel around among them, and he used letters instead of video teaching. But there was some, and I know the theologians are going to come after me. They've been doing it for 20 years. It's fine. It's fine.
Do you have an email for them? Geoff Surratt at leavemealone.com?
Just send it to Joey Spenson and it'll get to me. No, those battles are long gone. It's interesting, Joey. I'll get to answer your question, but it's interesting. As we were doing research, actually, my son was he actually, I think, played bass for you for a little while over at James Island. But anyway, he was a tour guide in downtown Charleston for a little while, and he learned that one of the churches, and I don't want to say which one because I'll say the wrong one, but it's one of the ones that still exists. Back in 1800, their congregation had outgrown their building, so they built another building just a few blocks away, right down in the middle of the city. And they hired another pastor, and one pastor would speak at one site for a month, the other one at the other site for a month, and then they would trade places and speak those same sermons. And they did this for, I forget how long, not a long time, but it was a pure multi-site church. The second building they built was burned down in one of the big fires in Charleston, and then they never rebuilt it. So I always thought that was interesting. Like, hundreds of years before we thought we were so innovative, they figured this thing out. The true OGs in the multi-site movement of today, Larry Osborne out at North Coast was doing video teaching in multiple venues back in the 1990s. Community Christian up in Naperville, Illinois, they had I know at least two campuses back around 2000, something like that. Willow Creek started a second site back then. And there were some others. And there was a church in Canada that was doing it. There was a church in, I think, Minnesota that was doing it. So there were a few of us. We gathered with Leadership Network with about 12 churches that they found from around the country. So we helped develop a lot of the ideas. We stole some, we innovated some. And Joey, you remember, like, it wasn't a lot of really smart people sitting around a table going, "Oh, we've come up with something that'll be revolutionary." It was a bunch of idiots sitting around a table going, "We don't know what to do." Like, a bunch of people are coming. We're doing all the services we can. We can't figure this thing out. I don't know. Let's open another auditorium over in West Ashley. Let's go to the you remember that theater? Let's go to the worst, nastiest theater in the history of the world. It's not there anymore, but let's go there and let's start showing a terrible video on VHS videotape. And, that's not what smart people do. Like, smart people would go, that's stupid, but it worked. So
there you go. Yeah. So when you say innovate, is there... And, I'm not fishing for anything particularly special about Seacoast. I think it's a special place. That's good enough for me. But is there anything that you could say, we innovated this aspect of it? The first thing that comes to mind is doing it cheaply.
Yeah. Greg used to say, my brother Greg used to say, I can't use all the words he did, but he said that one of our uniquenesses was exactly what you said, is we figured out how to do church in multiple locations as cheaply as possible. Like when we very first started, we'd spend $50,000 to launch or start a new site. And so, I think that we were innovative. Let's just say this: we were innovative for 2002, right? So you look back on it, and it's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But when we had sites all over South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, we would record a message on Saturday night. I'd drive it to the bus, I'd drive 12 videotapes to a bus station, put them on 3 different Greyhound buses, and in the morning, campus pastors would go to their local Greyhound bus station, pick up their tape, and go play their sermon. And that sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It was kind of goofy, but it was kind of fun, Joey, because the internet just wasn't up to it back then. Like, it just wasn't up to distributing video. And so, you know what? We figured out a way to do it. Like, we were church online, like every church since the pandemic is online. Well, we were, as far as I know, the second church behind Life Church in America that I know of, that we were streaming our services live every week. And we did it in a really cheap, I didn't know the word for it, but we hacked some code and made it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, so what was the first inkling of you leaving? How did it start? Was it simply a phone call from old Pastor Rick? I mean, how did that start? How did that start unfolding? And what year was it? Would it have been 2010?
Yeah, so we left at the end of 2010.
Okay.
Got to Saddleback Church January 2011. It started with a phone call, but from Greg. Said, you've kind of run your course here. We're kind of tired of you. And
no, that's not true.
Back in about 2008, I felt God stirring that, my season, my chapter at Seacoast. We love Seacoast. Like, we love it. We come back as often as we can, where there is zero animosity. Greg told me when we left, he'd love to do ministry together for the rest of our lives. But if this is where God's leading, let's do that. And, I feel exactly the same way. Greg and I still do stuff together. Like, we really enjoy it. But, I just felt God stirring and saying, maybe it's time for this next chapter. And I didn't know what it was. So I went to Greg and I talked to him about it. He was unbelievably supportive. It wasn't, all right, here's your, turn in your keys, grab your cardboard box, and let's go. It was, hey, let's process. I thought, okay, we'll process for the next 3 months. Joey, we processed for 2 years. For 2 years. I had people, I had opportunities. I thought I was going to be a lead pastor. And I talked to some churches, and I'd love to say that I just, closed the door. They just said no. Like, no, thank you. Like, why don't you stay in Charleston? It was a tough season.
Wow.
When we left, it was the hardest thing we've ever done. We had just had a granddaughter about 3 months before we left. But Joey, I imagine you've had these times. Like, Sherry and I were on the same page. We talked to a lot of wise counselors. They agreed with us. We went to California. We went to Saddleback. They were phenomenal. It was the hardest year of ministry I've ever had in my life. It was just spiritual attack. Vocationally, it was hard. Didn't know anybody. Like, it was an incredibly hard year. And looking back, I know that we followed God out to California. I know that's what we were supposed to do. I know we had to go through that year. I wish we hadn't have, but that's how we wound up sitting. I'm sitting where I am today. I wouldn't be here doing exactly what I know God wired me up to do. If I hadn't left Seacoast, which I loved and love, and hadn't gone to California, which was just incredibly hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard this from anybody else, but I got to share this perspective. So I think it probably was an email that went out to all staff, and basically something to the effect of, it was probably from Pastor Greg, and it was, hey, we are all going to meet together and we will run this on the internet. So, gather as staff if you can. And I'll never forget getting that video feed and seeing you and Pastor Greg sitting at a table. And in my opinion, it was it was like the biggest HR announcement ever at that point, and maybe still to this day, a healthy HR transition. I mean, it was like LeBron going to Miami sort of thing. And as it unfolded and it became more clear, I think we became more in shock. And this is a compliment to you, and not to disparage anyone else. And, now we have a lot more people in place, but there was seriously a feeling of like, are we going to be okay without Pastor Geoff? And I want to say that your way, way older brother felt the same way. Like there probably was we've been doing this for so long. You have been the guy that has overseen all the campuses. Oh my gosh, now you are transitioning out. Like, did you and Pastor Greg have some like real heart to heart? Oh my gosh, sort of like, did he have an OMG moment during all of this?
Yeah, that's very kind, Joey. That's very kind of you to share your response to that. Yeah, Greg and I had some great conversations. It was hard. Like I'm not gonna. It was very, very hard for us. Hard. I think for Greg, he said that it was. Here, can I give you just
please?
This is something I really strongly believe. When you leave a role, if it doesn't break your heart, then, I get that. Like some roles are bad and all of that. But if you're leaving a role where you feel like you've done your best and you've done good and you're leaving without bitterness and all of that kind of stuff, if you've done your job, if you want to know what it's like leaving that role, go fill your sink with water, stick your hand into it, and then pull it out and look at the hole that it leaves. Like that is good leadership. Like, and I'm not saying I'm a good leader. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is, because Seacoast Seacoast has thrived immediately after I left. Other people have stepped in, and Seacoast is so far beyond what I ever, to quote the scripture that you end every service with, it's so far beyond anything I could ever ask or imagine. You want to go, well, I hope they miss me a little bit, a little bit, but the biggest compliment is that they move on and they grow and they thrive after you're gone. And on the other side of that, like if you ever feel like, oh man, this place will collapse without me, well, that's on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you may not have done your job right. Yeah.
Right, exactly. That's on you. Figure it out. I told the church I work for now, I love this church, but I told them this week, I said, hey, my goal is always to work myself out of a job. And I see right now the role I'm in, I see steps that if we take them well, the job I'm doing now, I won't be doing in the future. Now, I think there's still a role for me there. If anyone's listening and where I currently am on staff, I don't think I'm going anywhere. We'll find out. But I think that's always my goal.
Yeah. So our listeners are very accustomed to hearing, and they know who I mean when I refer to Jack the Greater and Jack the Lesser. And I would say that was a huge part. Jack the Greater is a huge reason why we were able to stay consistent with the effectiveness of ministry and flourish. Am I right that you guys had a pretty good friendship? And maybe even from a business operational side, was there like some mentoring from him to you? What's some of the dynamics between you two? Because we love the Hoys around here. Love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I would describe Jack the Greater and honestly Jack the Lesser as two men that I just have unbelievable respect for. Love both of them. Jack the Greater, more than friendship, mentor. Like there aren't a lot of people I would point to that were close up mentors in my life. On the business side, Jack was incredibly helpful, but also, I don't know if you know, Byron Davis was a huge mentor to me and still is on the business side. Jack as well. Jack and I used to meet at least once a month for lunch, and he wasn't on staff. He was running his own company. And we met after I'd been there probably 4 or 5 years. And actually, Pastor Michael Morris said, you two need to meet. You need to have lunch. So we had lunch, and I immediately thought, anytime I can get this guy to sit down with me, I'll buy him food, whatever it takes.
You'll feed him.
Yeah. So we used to meet at a little Greasy Spoon diner over off of Rivers Avenue because it was kind of halfway. I think it's gone now. I won't name it because Maria's was a great place, but it was rough. It was rough. And so we'd be in there, we'd be talking, and they're slamming. Think Waffle House without all the ambiance. And they're slamming things around. And can I do my imitation of Jack the Greater? Like this has never been done in public before.
Oh, his son has done it publicly many times.
Okay. Well, mine has never been done before.
Yeah.
His sons will be better. So Jack has this really kind of quiet, a little bit high voice, but the things he puts out are gold. I still quote Jack all the time, but we'd be sitting in Maria's diner and I'd ask Jack a question and there's all this noise around us and I'd be across the table from him and Jack would go, well, Geoff, let me tell you.
You forgot You forgot the
yeah. The meaning of life. Here's what the meaning of life is. It's that you need to, and I'm like, Jack, I have to know this. And I can't hear a word he's saying. That's my Jack imitation.
I love it. How was it doing ministry with, but also under your brother's leadership? Like, was there ever any butting heads? And did he give you more margin for that sort of thing because y'all are brothers? Like, how'd y'all work that out? Was it challenging?
Yeah, the butting heads, Joey, it's funny. Every day, at the end of the day, Greg would walk into my office. He'd put his arm around me. And we would just sing Kumbaya together.
I cannot imagine that. I know you're lying.
And then we would light a candle, and it was just a beautiful moment. Greg is 6 years older than me. He moved out when I was 12. And so we were never in the same city from the time I was 12 on. And so when I came to work at Seacoast, we were brothers, but we didn't go on vacation together.
Wow.
We didn't hang out together.
Yeah, 12 years old. That's early in your life. Yeah.
Greg and I weren't on the phone all the time. We weren't emailing back and forth. So honestly, when I came to work at Seacoast, we didn't actually know each other all that well. And so some people have a picture of brothers working together. They used to fight when they were kids and all that. We didn't have any of that. I mean, he used to wrestle with me, but like I'm 8 years old. He's kicking my butt. Mm-hmm. Working together. I think by being brothers, though, I think what we had is, sure, we had disagreements. You say butt heads. I wouldn't even describe it at that. We would see a different sky. Maybe that's a different way to put it. But what I have always said is by being brothers, we could take shortcuts. Like we could get to the meat quicker. Whoever the management person said, you have to go in with a compliment and then a criticism and then end with a compliment. Well, we would take the two sides of the Oreo off and we would just go straight to the conversation, but it wasn't, I don't remember it being angry. I don't remember it. I mean, we were passionate, but not angry. I don't remember going away and, having those kinds of things, but I just felt like we were, like I said, we were able to cut to the quick a little quicker than maybe some people.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. I'd love for you to I hope this isn't offensive, but this will stretch the Surratt here, but I'd love for you to get a little warm, fuzzy vibe and brag on your brother a little bit. Like obviously I've been here now since 2002. I recognize how special of leadership we have been led by and currently being led by with Pastor Josh. But what would you say are some of the first things that come to mind when you think about your older brother's uniqueness when it comes to ministry?
Yeah, I learned how to preach from Greg. Like when I got to Seacoast, I had been in ministry for 14 years, been a youth pastor for most of that, had been a senior pastor. I'd preached hundreds of times, but I learned how to preach from listening to Greg and from sitting in countless sermon planning meetings, series planning meetings. He really taught me, and he's not, Greg, he's not a school teacher. Sit down, here are the 3 points you need to know. It was more caught than taught, but I learned how you communicate the gospel in a way that's clear, understandable, but mostly relatable that people connect with. Greg has a great penchant for believing in people. I have a great penchant for seeing the downsides. Yeah. And so I learned a lot about, just believing in people. And Greg is always open to possibility. I learned though, here's the insight. Here's inside information. If any Seacoast staff is new, now I know Greg's not involved that much anymore. I don't think Josh uses this phrase, but Greg's phrase was, it's a possibility. So I would come to Greg and I'd say, hey, what do you think about us doing this? And he would go, it's a possibility. What I eventually learned is that's Greg speak for there is no way in heck we're ever going to do that. And the other phrase I learned from Greg, Joey, was we'll figure it out. So that would come from the other direction. Greg would come with an idea and he'd go, hey, let's go do this. And I'd go, yeah, that sounds great. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that. And he would say, we'll figure it out. I learned that meant you'll figure it out and I'll go fishing.
Another big one is you may be right.
You may be right. Yep. You may be right has been so helpful for me, to be honest with you. As I was thinking, I mentioned earlier about the guy who wrote on my social media that my post was meaningless. And I thought about it for a little while. And then I thought, you know what? You may be right. You may be right. We don't need to argue about that. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about the Surratt Brothers podcast. People may not know that there's another Surratt brother. There's a Surratt sister also. But hey, I don't know if you realize this, but this is how old school I am around here. When I started as a campus pastor, Pastor Chris was still the pastor of Greenville. It was just for a short span of time, but that's how old school I am. But tell us about that podcast. Yeah, well, old school is that when I came to Seacoast, Chris was the music director at Seacoast. Oh, wow. Yeah. The podcast, it's funny. I wish I had a big mission vision statement for it. It started with me going, you know what? I know how Greg and Chris and I talk in private and kick things around. And Chris and Greg are two of the funniest people I know on earth. What if we just kind of got together and recorded it? And maybe filtered out some of the more unfiltered pieces and just recorded it and then brought in some of our friends and talked to them about stuff that we're thinking about. So that was kind of the start of it. It's aimed mostly, honestly, at pastors. We have a lot of people that listen that aren't pastors and get feedback that they enjoy it, but it's aimed at pastors. And it's really what it is, Joey. It's mostly talking about church from a very much practitioner, older guy, been around, seen a lot kind of viewpoint. And honestly, we just have fun. Like I just have fun once a week. Greg is not on every single time. That would be a lot of Greg, and we really don't need that much Greg. But I really enjoy getting on with Chris, and when Greg can come on and just kind of talking, and then talking to friends. Yeah, that's cool. Hey, real quick, Pastor Geoff, you have a hard out at 11:30, correct? Yeah. Okay, cool. We're wrapping this thing up. All right. Well, yeah. And part of the fun that you guys have is talking some non-ministry stuff. And so I thought that I would bring in some examples of questions that I think maybe you guys would tackle and maybe have before. So 3 lighthearted,
pop culture sports questions, and then we'll close up with two more serious ministry related questions. But who does rival Michael Jordan? If there was someone to rival him as the greatest of all time, who is it? Most people would just say LeBron, of course.
Yeah, I don't have a second place. I wouldn't put LeBron in that category. Like, I think LeBron is great now. I think if you go 10 years down the road, we're still going to be talking about LeBron. You know who I would say rivals Michael Jordan? This is how old school I am. Is Bill Russell. Bill Russell, I think, won 7 championships, 7 out of 9. Coached and played on a championship team. But yeah, of modern guys, I love them. I mean, I'm in Denver. Nikola Jokic is just incredible. Is he Michael Jordan? Is he Michael Jordan? No, not at all.
Right. Check this out. I've got a number 5.
Look at that.
And it's even got a goat on there. Obviously.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, Bill Russell. Yeah, so the Celtics are coming for you guys. In fact, I kind of think that's my biggest concern is the Nuggets. I'm not sure. That team is so solid. I don't know if anybody can beat them, but here's to hoping. 85 Bears, greatest NFL team of all time.
Most entertaining NFL team of all time. Quick story. Sherry doesn't care about football, my wife, but we watched the 85 Bears. They used to headbutt each other with their helmets, right? So Sherry, I'm standing in the kitchen and she's about 6 inches tall, shorter than I am. She walks up to me and headbutts me, but catches me right in the chin. And I almost pass out. And she said, but the Bears do it all the time. I said, but they're wearing helmets.
I mean, think about this. For people who don't know the sports history of the 85 Bears, the audacity and just how unbelievable it was. The team produced a song called the Super Bowl Shuffle during the season. They weren't even in the playoffs yet, and they're like, Super Bowl Shuffle, let's do this.
Undisputed greatest NFL team of all time, and I don't remember the year, but back in the 70s, the undefeated Dolphins team. Until another team does it,
sure,
they're the one.
There you go. All right, Rocky or Godfathers, which one's the better series or your favorite? Out of the two.
Godfathers. I have never seen Godfather 3, and I really haven't seen all of the later Rocky movies. I like Rocky. Godfather is, it's a go-to.
Yeah, all right, Godfather 3 is a very, very sad ending. All right, so thank you so much for your time. 2 serious questions. How would you answer this question? Because obviously there's a lot of people who would just say this is a given, but are churches dying? And you can redefine terms or however you want to, but how would you answer that question?
Yes, churches are dying. There have been dying churches since the beginning of time. If you go back to all the churches that Paul planted, none of them still exist. They all died. Sherry and I were talking about this today, not about churches, but organizations. There's a season for everything. So there are dying churches. There are also churches just so much life, exploding, seeing life transformation. We do a project in England, in the UK. That's after this podcast. I'm talking to some guys in England. We're planning our next meeting in the fall, and churches are exploding over there. So is the church dying? No, not at all. Are churches dying? Yeah.
Yeah. What would be the most, if you could right now send a text message to all pastors and with hopes of pointing out something that would be extremely helpful, whether that's pointing out what you have found to be a common treacherous territory that a lot of pastors find themselves in. But if you could send out a recommendation to pastors, admonition, piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Yeah, two things real quick. One is comparison kills, and we all know it. But I was texting with a pastor today who was lamenting some statistics that he saw that compared to something he had done in the past, and he said, "I'm still struggling to overcome this." And I get it, I understand. But man, God has called you into a unique community, into a unique church to do unique work that has nothing to do with what some mega church or some multi-site church. I love multi-site, mega, all of that. but what has God called you to do in your community? Let's focus on that. And the other thing is something Pastor Greg talks about all the time. Don't do it alone. Don't do it alone. If you can't figure out who to hang out with, text, call, email, smoke signal, tell me that all my posts are meaningless so we can chat, whatever it takes, but just don't do it alone.
There you go. So the Surratt Brothers podcast, people can get that anywhere. Do you have, like, if someone said, yeah, I'd like to check that out, which episode should I start with? Is there low-hanging fruit, or it's just kind of like, whatever, just start with the first one?
Well, since I have no memory, I would go start with the last one that we recorded because my wife was the guest and she ripped me apart, told embarrassing stories about me, made fun of me. And so if Seacoast people remember Sherry, you will enjoy hearing her at her height telling embarrassing stories about me.
Nice. And I still get your emails. Would you say that you have a blog or an email list, or, I want to include this in the show notes. So what are you doing? You're writing stuff. I just read the emails. Do you have a blog that it's coming from?
Some of it gets posted on a blog, but the email is where I would just say, hey, I'd love to have people check out the email.
Sweet. All right. Last question. If you could only listen to one of these for the rest of your life, 2 artists, Brandon Lake or Keith Green?
This is the Seacoast podcast. Brandon Lake.
Oh,
no comparison.
For sure.
It's hey, here's a funny thing. It's been a while since I read this, but people love the music of their teen years. And that's why they go back again and again and they listen to what they listened to when they were teens. That's why new music, except for Taylor Swift, doesn't take off. Keith Green was my teenage years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I saw him live probably when I was 2 or 3, very shortly before he passed away.
I did too.
Yeah. Pastor Geoff, thank you so much. It was great personally just to catch up with you, see you, be able to talk to you. And I think everybody's going to enjoy this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joey. It was fun.
All right.
You've been listening to the Things You Won't Hear on Sunday Seacoast Podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to our Facebook group page. Also, we'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes downloaded right when they come out. Thanks so much for listening.